Well, if you're not keeping tabs on your food, it's possible no one is. That's the message from federal inspectors to Metro Vancouver residents. The union representing Canadian Food Inspection Agency workers is sounding the alarm over alleged cuts. It says the Customer Protection Unit has been disbanded, leaving Metro Vancouver as the only major area without a specialized team. The inspectors handle things like checking meat and making sure it matches labels. The union says that will still happen, but a lot less often.
Unless you know consumers that have labs set up in their own kitchens at home, there's no way they could find out enough of what the problems are to even register the complaints. I mean, as Bob said, they're not going to know if that beef is part pork. And for example, I mean, it could be a health concern, but it could also be a serious religious issue. And yet, how would you know?
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the agency's claims are false. It says there have not been cuts to food safety, but concedes it has changed the way it is handling the Vancouver area.
So I don't trust either the CFA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, or the FDA.
Of course, I don't really trust the government. If you take a look at Rob Ford, you can see why.
Maybe he should worry about his food intake.
We're talking about, like seriously, the problem with food inspections and laws around foods. They've allowed the monopolization of the food industry, and now we see skyrocketing prices.
And of course, we also have problems like GMOs.
Oh, yes. The revolving door between the FDA, the American government, and Monsanto, the leading GMO company, has been shown on the internet continuously for about 3 years now.
And now they're going to mess with your coffee.
Your coffee.
There's nothing sacred. Check this out.
That morning cup of joe is sometimes the only thing that can get a pep in our step before work. But what if that coffee was genetically modified? That's the talk of the town. Coffee that wasn't made by nature, but by science.
They now say they have the keys to genetically modifying coffee. That's just great.
I don't
Always looking for stronger coffee.
I don't think it's great.
Scientists say they have the genome sequence of the Robusta coffee bean, which supplies roughly a third of the world's coffee. And they could possibly change things like its flavor and even modify it to ward off pests that commonly harm the crop. The Washington Post spoke with Victor Albert, the lead author of the study. He made an interesting note about how scientists could use the findings for decaf coffee. This might make it possible to knock off caffeine production in a variety of coffee plants. So to make decaf coffee, you wouldn't have to go through the process of extracting the caffeine. You could just grow coffee beans that don't make it at all. The Non-GMO Project, as you can tell by its name, is against them. Most developed nations do not consider GMOs to be safe. In the US, the government has approved GMOs based on studies conducted by the same corporations that created them and profit from their sale. But the U.S. National Library of Medicine points out some potential benefits of genetically modified food, like more nutritious and better tasting food, less pesticide use, and plants that grow faster. It also lists cons on a much shorter list, like modified plants or animals may have genetic changes that are unexpected and harmful. The world consumes 2.25 billion cups a day, and I'm pretty sure I drink about half of that. For Newsy, I'm Micah Sargent.
So, of course, my prediction here is that crowds will be forming with torches and pitchforks, because when you start messing with the Canadians' coffee, you take your own corporate welfare in your own hands.
Just ask the people at Tim Hortons.
Okay, so GMOs, I want you to do your research on it and join us on coming up here September the 20th all around the world, where we're going to be marching against Monsanto and starting to stand up for our food sovereignty.
We got to stand up for our food freedom.
And that's, get involved. Make sure you check out those grocery prices. They're going up because we don't have sovereignty over our own food.
Down in Brazil, the South American farmers there decided that they want to sue Monsanto because of the increased cost of pesticides, because the product they're buying is not living up to the advertising hype.
So remember, Monsanto and GMOs trying to say that their products work and create lower grocery prices just ain't so. So check it out.
A farm group said on Monday, genetically modified corn seeds are no longer protecting Brazilian farmers from voracious tropical bugs, increasing costs as producers turn to pesticides. Ricardo Tomczyk, president of Apro Soja Farm Lobby in Mato Grosso State, said, producers want 4 major manufacturers of so-called BT corn seeds to reimburse them for the cost of spraying up to 3 coats of pesticides this year. He said the caterpillars should die if they eat the corn, but since they didn't die this year, producers had to spend on average 120 reais, $54 per hectare, at a time that corn prices are terrible.
So once again, we point out the fact that if a company is saying it and profiting it from it, well, it's probably questionable.
What a shock it's not living up to its advertising hype.
We've seen nothing but an explosion in food prices as the monopolization of our food sources gets taken out of our hands and put in the hands of big corporations and big government.
But down in Guatemala, the peasants are revolting again.
I know.
They're revolting against new legislation the government's trying to pass in order to protect corporations like Monsanto, Dow, and Syngenta.
Well, we kind of grin about the Wizard of Id reference that Robert just made of the peasants being revolting.
Check
I know.
Chanting seeds are for life, not for business, protesters take to the streets in Guatemala City. The groups are demanding the government retract a law that they believe will open the door to the privatization of seeds. They say the so-called Monsanto law threatens Guatemala's food supply and could make the country's poor even poorer.
We farmers choose our best corn to replant every year. This is how we've worked for thousands of years. But this law will allow Monsanto and other companies to patent these seeds. And the Guatemalan state will criminalize people who still use this traditional way of planting.
In June, Guatemala's Congress quietly passed the law for the protection of new plant varieties. The decree is meant to protect the intellectual property of plant breeders who've created or discovered new plant varieties. Using patented seeds without permission could be punishable by fines, imprisonment, or both. Scientists at the government's Institute of Agricultural Science and Technology have created more than 140 improved seeds. Many are given to farmers free of charge and can be reused. None are patented. The head of the institute says legislators should respect another ruling passed earlier this year that declares corn a national patrimony.
This law puts the genetic diversity that we have in this country at risk. Any person or company can protect these plant materials without having to invest anything, or without recognizing the rights of the indigenous communities who originally discovered these materials and who worked to domesticate these plants.
The Monsanto law is due to take effect in late September. But with 70% of Guatemalans growing their own crops, it will be hard to convince people that what's good for plant breeders is what's best for the country.
Right here in Kelowna, we're going to be hosting the March Against Monsanto at 12 noon on Saturday, September the 20th at Parkinson Rec Centre. So we encourage you to be there.
Because people power works, activism is working, and people around the world are waking up.
And fascism is losing. It's losing so bad, they're starting to promote it at the federal government level, and of course, they're failing at that. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet, urging you to join us and stand up for your freedom.
You can do it.
Fresh pork sausage grills away at the farmer's market. The meat comes from a local farm, and demand is increasing.
People always ask for local products, and actually this year is the first year I purchased local pork, and that's what I'm featuring.
Buying local meat and produce is a part of a growing farm-to-table movement, where at Nancy O's, select items on the menu come from local producers. The extra work to source the local food is worth it.
We try to connect with the farmers directly, see what kind of product they are producing and how we can get on board with that, how that can match with our menu, and how we can get it delivered directly from the farm to us with as little middlemen as possible.
The farm-to-table concept aligns with what some call the 100-mile diet, which is implemented at the farmers market in Prince George.
Eating local is now a provincial mandate rather than local or 100-mile diet. We are pretty much bound to the 100-mile by School District 57 boundaries, but we do try to supplement outside of that.
Besides sustainability and community development, there's always a fresher taste, which is passed along to the consumer.
The taste and the quality of the products that we get are awesome. When the produce is cut that morning and delivered in the afternoon, it's so flavorful, you can't match it. To support the local economy, the money stays in our economy is an added bonus. Meeting the farmers and learning more about the supply chain, how much work goes into the farm and how much work goes into producing each piece of food gives you a real respect for the food.
That respect for food through the farm-to-table movement is also being brought into local schools with a farm-to-classroom and farm-to-cafeteria program implemented through Northern Health. To Your Health, Catherine Hansen, CKPG News.
The Washington Post had a pretty lengthy piece recently about how the FDA has kind of scaled back when it comes to oversight of the food industry, and the food industry has taken complete advantage of the lack of oversight. So let me give you an example. There has been an explosion of food additives in our food, so processed food, and that includes chemical preservatives, flavorings, and thickening agents, right? So some of the things that are considered additives are very simple ingredients that we use in everyday cooking, like vinegar or salt, right? But there are other chemicals that have now entered the market that the FDA either doesn't know about or simply is turning a blind eye to. So Michael Taylor, who is the Deputy Commissioner for the Food and Drug Administration, said the following to the Washington Post, and I think that this is a very troubling statement. "We simply do not have the information to vouch for the safety of many of these chemicals." Now, as a result of the lack of oversight from the FDA, people are suffering from serious health issues from these additives, including asthmatic attacks, serious bouts of vomiting, intestinal tract disorders, and other health problems. Now, let me tell you how the policy has changed within the FDA and why the food industry is taking full advantage of it. So there was a voluntary certification system that has nearly replaced one that relied on more formal, time-consuming reviews where the FDA, rather than companies, made the final determination on what is safe. The result is that consumers have little way of being certain that the food products they buy won't harm them. This new system relies on the food industry to police itself, to determine on its own whether these additives are safe for human consumption. Now, when you have companies that have a profit motive, do you think they're going to really do a thorough investigation on additives for their products?
The cooking tips are free here at the Chinatown supermarket, a big bonus for shoppers who might not be able to tell the difference between watercress and pea shoots. But even Claudia Lee, a first-generation Chinese-Canadian, learned something new on each visit.
I want to have good food that makes me feel at home, cultural food, but I also want it to be healthy.
And that's why she's launched the Choi Project through her nonprofit Hua Foundation. The mission is to take the local food movement into traditional Chinese grocery stores. There are bilingual signs in store and a free Choi Guide pamphlet highlighting what's local, in season, and pesticide free. Right now, the Chinatown supermarket is the one and only test retailer, and though Ken Lau was quite skeptical when the foundation first approached him in January, the response since the launch of the Choi Project 2 months ago has been incredible.
All the local people, the Caucasian and the local Chinese, when they see the sign saying that it's a local vegetable, they tend to buy more, they support the local farmer, and they think it's better price and better quality.
The goal will be to expand it to additional stores next year. That in turn should help encourage even more local farmers to grow Asian produce. Already half of the products here in the summer season are locally sourced. And for wannabe foodies who need even more inspiration, part of the Choi Project includes cooking workshops approved by Grandma, using, of course, local whenever possible.
For our elder generation, they know how important it is, and they know what good food tastes like. For our generation, we're thinking kind of one further step of, well, where does it come from and how does it impact our bodies and our economy and our planet?
Elaine Young, Global News.
Do you want a breakfast cereal that goes snap, crackle, and bump in the night? Well, then try Frost Quakes. Frost Quakes. It's the cereal that reminds you that living in Canada is similar to living on the surface of Mars. Pour milk on it, and Frost Quakes instantly freezes and expands, causing your bowl to violently shatter. Does each serving of Frost Quakes give you the daily recommended amount of vitamins and fiber? We don't know. But you should 100% wear gloves when eating it. Enjoy the only cereal that Health Canada has issued a frostbite warning for. Never heard of Frost Quakes before? Well, I guess that's because it's new. It's hard to say. Things are crazy now. Frost Quakes. Shovel some in the north mouth of your face every morning.
As Gordy the Snow Leopard says, they're bright.